They told me I didn't look like someone who belonged in first class. Not because of how I dressed, but because I'm a 34-year-old black woman who dared to succeed quietly. Minutes later, I was in handcuffs, dragged off a plane, surrounded by eyes too afraid to speak. What they didn't know, what they never suspected, was that one call from me would freeze $850 million and bring an entire airline to its knees. This isn't just my story. This is the reckoning they never saw coming. I arrived at Reagan National Airport 2 hours before my flight, dressed in a charcoal gray pantsuit that matched the stormy skies outside. My suitcase, a matte black Rimowa, rolled silently behind me as I crossed the marble floors of Terminal C. I wasn't early because I was anxious. I was early because power doesn't rush. It arrives exactly when it means to. I had a meeting in Los Angeles in less than 24 hours that would shape the future of institutional investment in green energy. I was slated to present on behalf of Clark Equity Strategies, the firm I'd spent the last 8 years building from a laptop in my apartment into a multi-billion-dollar portfolio advisory. It wasn't my first time speaking at a global finance summit, but it was the first time I'd be doing so as an equity partner. I'd earned that seat. One strategic acquisition, one sleepless quarter, one quietly lethal boardroom takedown at a time. The summit air attendant at the check-in counter barely glanced up. "ID?" she asked flatly, even though I'd already placed my platinum priority card and digital boarding pass on the counter. I handed her my passport. She squinted at it, then looked at me. The pause stretched just a little too long. "Purpose of travel?" "I'm flying to Los Angeles for a conference," I said evenly, offering nothing more than necessary. I'd learned long ago that the less you say, the less they twist. She scanned my documents, then passed them back without a smile. "Gate 41. Boarding in 40 minutes. As I walked away, I heard the man behind me step up. White, polo shirt, no ID visible. "Mr. Wallace, welcome back, sir," she said brightly. "Upgraded you to 1A again." Subtle, surgical, routine. At security, it continued. The TSA agent waved me into the body scanner while letting 3 white men ahead of me through the metal detector instead. "Random check," she said. I didn't argue. Arguing only confirmed their suspicion. That you were a problem. By the time I reached Gate 41, the first-class boarding group had already begun forming. I joined the short line, noticing only one other person of color, an older South Asian gentleman who gave me a polite nod. That's when she stepped in front of me. "Excuse me," the flight attendant said. Blonde, late 40s, the kind of woman who wore authority like a too-tight sweater. Her name tag read Karen W. I already knew. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" I blinked. "Sure," I said, handing it over. She stared at it longer than necessary, then looked up sharply. "This is for first class." "Yes." She didn't hand it back. "Are you sure this is your flight?" The line grew still. My heartbeat stayed steady, but I could feel the start of that old, familiar burn in my throat. Not anger, humiliation. Anger came later. "Yes," I repeated, calm and quiet. "Washington to Los Angeles, Flight 481, Seat 2B. Karen W. glanced at the screen on her tablet, then at me, then back again. Lips pursed like she'd just tasted something sour. Finally, she handed the pass back with a forced smile. "Proceed." I walked past her without another word. That's when I noticed the man filming. He wasn't obvious. Sitting near the window across from the boarding lane, holding his phone like he was texting. But his lens was angled precisely toward the exchange that had just happened. He didn't flinch when I made eye contact. In fact, he nodded once, like an acknowledgement. A few seats down, another gate agent glanced at him and gave a slight head tilt. There was recognition there, not the kind between friends, the kind between insiders. I boarded the plane and took my seat in 2B. The cabin smelled of citrus cleaner and old leather. I placed my briefcase under the seat in front of me, adjusted my watch, and exhaled slowly. That interaction should have been nothing. It had been nothing so many times before. A misreading, a misunderstanding, an isolated incident. But I knew better. These things weren't isolated. They were patterned, scripted, played out thousands of times a day across airports, banks, boardrooms. What they hadn't calculated was the camera and the man holding it. He boarded 5 minutes later, Group 1, and took seat 1D. I recognized him now, not by name, but by profile. White, late 30s, trim beard, navy sport coat over a linen shirt. Corporate, but not overdressed. His laptop had a Global Air Group sticker on it, the parent company of Summit Air. So he wasn't just anyone. As we made brief eye contact again, my phone vibrated. A text from Dad. You land, you lead. Don't let them shake you before takeoff. I smiled faintly. Caleb Clark wasn't a man who gave pep talks, but he did give timing, and timing, in our family, was everything. Karen W. walked down the aisle, checking overhead bins, still giving me the occasional glance like she hadn't quite closed the case. When she passed my row, she didn't ask the man in 2A for his pass. She did ask me. Again, just loud enough for the woman in 3C to pause her podcast. Boarding pass, please. I handed it to her, again. She stared. Again. I stared back this time. Is there an issue? I asked, my voice even. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. No, she muttered, handing it back. Behind me, someone coughed in a way that felt intentional. The man in 1D, still watching, still filming. I barely had time to settle before Karen W. returned. This time, she brought a small tray of pre-flight drinks. Champagne for the man in 2A, sparkling water with lime for the woman across the aisle. When she reached me, her smile evaporated. Would you like something to drink? She asked, her voice flat. Still water, please, I said, opening my laptop. She gave a short nod and disappeared. I glanced at the time. 28 minutes to departure. I pulled up the deck for the Los Angeles summit and tried to refocus, but the cabin had a static tension to it now. It wasn't just me imagining it. The man in 2A kept stealing glances at me over his magazine. The woman behind me had gone quiet. Karen returned with a bottle of water, uncapped, no glass, and placed it on my tray without a word. Subtle, always subtle. I sipped the water and turned back to the screen. Bullet point 3 of my opening. Capital resilience begins with ethical leverage. I'd written it weeks ago, but now, sitting here in this manufactured discomfort, it resonated differently. Excuse me, came a voice beside me. I turned to see the man in 2A leaning slightly toward me. He had salt and pepper hair, sharp features, and the kind of soft eyes that suggested either kindness or calculation. I'm Jackson, he said, offering a brief smile. Jackson Hale. We're seatmates, looks like. I nodded. Madison. He lowered his voice. I saw what happened at the gate. That wasn't okay. I held his gaze for a beat, searching for any hint of condescension. I found none. Thanks, I said, then returned to my laptop. 10 seconds passed, then 15, then click. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Jackson's phone, angled slightly, screen dimmed, was recording again. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. But something shifted inside me. Karen passed through again, doing her final checks. She paused near my row. Ma'am, she said, more loudly this time. May I see your boarding pass once more? That made 4 times. I looked up slowly, locking eyes with her. I've shown it 3 times already, I said evenly. It's just for confirmation, she insisted, voice saccharine. There's been a seating discrepancy in the system. Funny how that discrepancy never applied to anyone else in this cabin. I retrieved my boarding pass again and handed it over without comment. She looked at it, then at me, then back again. She said, pretending to study it. I'm going to double-check this with the crew manifest. Karen turned and disappeared to the galley. Jackson leaned in slightly. "I've taken this flight every week for 4 years," he said quietly. "I've never seen them do this. Ever." "Do you always record them?" He hesitated. "I'm working on something. I freelance." "For who?" He hesitated again. "Let's just say I've been collecting footage for months, investigating Summit's internal training, or lack thereof." I nodded slowly, understanding beginning to form. "You're not just a seatmate," I said. "No," he admitted. "But I didn't expect this. Not today. Not you." I looked away. The burn in my throat was back. Karen returned 10 minutes later with another flight attendant, a younger woman, early 30s, brunette, stiff posture. She wore the same Navy uniform, but her expression lacked the smug control Karen exuded. "Ms. Clark," Karen said, louder than necessary, "it appears there may be a misallocation of seating. Would you be willing to move to the main cabin while we resolve this?" My laptop clicked shut. "No," I said firmly. "Ma'am, this is just to avoid disruption," the younger attendant added quickly. "There is no disruption," I said, my tone still calm but sharpened. "I'm in the seat assigned on my boarding pass, which I've shown 4 times. Karen folded her arms. "I'm simply trying to avoid any further escalation." "Escalation," I repeated. "You mean like being asked to leave a paid seat with no justification?" A few heads turned now. The atmosphere shifted palpably. Jackson spoke up. "She's been calm the entire time. If anyone's escalating, it's you." Karen's lips tightened. "Sir, please don't interfere." He leaned back, hands up. "Just stating facts." Karen looked at me again. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist." "No." The word landed like a dropped weight. "I'm not moving. I have paid for this seat. I am entitled to sit in it. And unless you can produce a manifest showing someone else owns 2B, I suggest you step away." Karen's nostrils flared. "Then I'll be forced to get the captain. Do what you must." She stormed off. The younger attendant gave me a look, something between pity and apology. Then followed. The cabin buzzed. People were pretending not to listen, but they were. Jackson reached for his phone again, whispering, "Just in case." I sat back, breathing slowly, heart pounding behind my ribs. This was happening again, and I had a feeling it was only the beginning. The silence after Karen left was heavier than the engine hum. I could feel the weight of it pressing against my shoulders, making the air around me thinner. I wasn't shaking, not yet. I'd mastered stillness long ago, but beneath my stillness, every nerve was tensed like piano wire. 2 rows behind me, someone muttered something inaudible. Laughter followed, tight and uncomfortable. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then he appeared. Captain Roger Hayes. Tall, mid-50s, trim build, silver hair neatly combed beneath his cap. He entered the cabin with an expression sculpted for authority, blank, but with undertones of superiority. The kind of man who spoke in clipped phrases, always expecting compliance. He didn't look at anyone else. He walked straight to me. "Ma'am," he began, his voice firm and polished. "I understand you're not cooperating with my flight crew." Not even a greeting, not a question, just a conclusion. I looked him in the eye. "I've complied with every request," I replied evenly. "I've shown my boarding pass 4 times. I'm sitting in the seat assigned to me." He didn't blink. "You were asked to move to the main cabin while we resolved a discrepancy." "Based on what discrepancy?" "That's not your concern." I let the words hang between us. The injustice of it burned hot in my throat, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of flinching. "This isn't a request," he said. "You're being removed from the aircraft." Around me, passengers froze in place. Phones appeared, not obviously but subtly, like they were checking email. Jackson had already hit record again. "You're removing me for sitting in my assigned seat?" I asked. "I'm removing you for disrupting pre-flight procedures. I haven't raised my voice, haven't left my seat, and haven't disobeyed any instructions, unless existing quietly is now a disruption." He looked to Karen, who had returned and was now hovering near the cockpit door with crossed arms.
"She's refusing to cooperate,"
Karen said, her voice elevated for effect. "She's becoming argumentative." I exhaled through my nose, locking my jaw shut. Arguing now wouldn't help. I'd seen too many headlines. The captain gave a curt nod. "We'll call airport security." And then, just as he turned, I saw it. A flash of movement from the jump seat behind the galley curtain. A young male crew member, no older than 25, with olive skin and anxious eyes. He glanced at me and winked. It was fast, barely perceptible, but it was intentional. He looked away just as quickly and pretended to adjust the service cart. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Security arrived 6 minutes later. 2 officers, both white men, early 40s, with matching TSA badges and forced authority. They entered the cabin like enforcers, not peacekeepers. "This her?" one asked. Karen nodded. "She's refusing to comply," the captain added. I slowly closed my laptop, lifted it into my bag, and stood without being asked. My movements were deliberate, rehearsed. I'd been preparing for this moment my entire life, even if I didn't know it. "I'm recording this interaction," I said calmly, holding my phone in plain view. "Phone's down, ma'am," one officer barked. "No recordings during removal procedures." "That's not FAA policy," said a voice behind me. "Jackson." The officer's face darkened. "Sir, stay out of it." "I'm staying seated, just speaking the truth." I glanced at Jackson, nodded once, then turned back to the aisle. "I'll come peacefully," I said. "But I want the name and badge number of every person involved in this decision." One of the officers scoffed. "You'll get what you're entitled to." I was escorted to the front of the plane. The passengers parted like a curtain, some pretending to look away, others openly staring. My heels clicked on the floor like a metronome, each step harder than the last. Then, just as I stepped past the cockpit threshold, I saw it. A small dome camera embedded in the ceiling panel. Not the wide-angle view typical of public surveillance, but a tight-lensed, high-definition unit pointed directly at the boarding doorway. And it was on, recording, blinking red. Its angle had caught everything, from my first step into the aircraft, to the confrontation, to this humiliating walk of removal. I met its gaze, chin held high. "You're watching? Good. Let the footage speak when words are denied." Outside the plane, on the jet bridge, the younger officer pulled out a pair of cuffs. "That really necessary?" I asked. "Standard procedure for non-compliant removals," he said without conviction. The cuffs were cold metal, rough against my wrists. Behind me, the plane door closed with a final, echoing thunk. They were going to fly without me. But this wasn't over, not even close. The holding room was a beige box with no windows and a buzz in the lights that made the silence louder. The walls were too clean, the chairs too hard, the air too still, like the place had been designed to flatten people into submission. I sat with my wrists still cuffed behind me, fingers tingling from the cold bite of steel. My purse and laptop bag had been placed out of reach on a plastic table in the corner. A mounted camera in the ceiling blinked at me silently. Across the room, the 2 airport security officers conferred in low voices. One of them, the older, broad-shouldered one, kept glancing back at me like I might explode if he blinked. The other was thinner, maybe early 30s. Olive complexion, short cropped hair, eyes flickering with something more than protocol. Hesitation? Recognition? I watched them calmly, refusing to shrink. "Ms. Clark," the younger one finally said, stepping forward. "We're waiting for the airline to decide whether they're filing formal charges for non-compliance. And in the meantime, you'll remain here." "Am I being detained?" He hesitated. "Technically, yes, until a supervisor clears release. Then I'd like to make a phone call." The older officer shook his head. "You're not under arrest. You're in administrative custody. Not the same rights." The younger one glanced at him, then back at me. "Give us a moment." They stepped outside. I stared at the door after they left, willing it to reopen. 3 minutes passed, then 5. When the door opened again, it was the younger one. alone this time. He walked in, closed the door behind him, and looked at me for a long beat before speaking. "Is your name really Madison Clark?" I nodded slowly. "I thought so," he said, almost to himself. 8 years ago, you ran a mentorship program in DC for kids from Ward 8, partnered with local nonprofits. My breath caught. "I used to come to those Saturday sessions," he continued. "My name's Luis." He smiled, small, tentative. "I remember you," I said, surprised by the honesty in my voice. "You used to ask a million questions, sat in the front every time." His grin widened. "You told me I didn't have to be what people expected, that if I could build discipline, I could build a future." I nodded once. I meant it. Luis hesitated, then walked to the table and retrieved my purse. He reached inside, pulled out my phone, and placed it gently in my cuffed hands. "One call," he said. "I'll buy you the time." I held his gaze. "Thank you." He turned away and pretended to busy himself with paperwork at the corner desk. I dialed. It rang once, then again, then... "Caleb Clark," came the deep, clipped voice on the other end. "Dad," I said, and just saying the word made my throat tighten. "They removed me from the flight, cuffed me. Security has me in a holding room." There was a pause, just the sound of his breathing. Controlled, steady. "Where?" "Reagan National, Summit Air Flight 481. Another pause. I could hear fingers tapping keys in the background. "Who?" I gave him the names. Karen Whitmore. Captain Roger Hayes. Flight 481, Gate 41. "Are you injured?" "No, just humiliated. Again." "Good," he said flatly. "Then we begin." I knew what that meant. Knew it like I knew the sound of a closing deal. The tone in his voice had shifted. Father to strategist, warmth to precision. "Don't sign anything. Don't say anything else. I'll have legal there in 30 minutes. PR in 10. Stay silent." "I will." "And Madison?" "Yes." "Thank you for not breaking." The line went dead. Luis turned around slowly. "You good?" I nodded, slipping the phone under my thigh before the other officer returned. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed once, discreetly, on vibrate. A message from my father. 850 memos frozen. Deal suspended. Summit stock will bleed by morning. Good. I closed my eyes for a moment. That wasn't just money. That was leverage. That was systemic consequence. Luis came over, unlocking my cuffs quietly. "No charges," he said. "They're letting you go." "Of course they are." He hesitated again. "Madison, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. That should have never happened to you. It didn't just happen to me." He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. As I stood and retrieved my belongings, I turned to him. "You ever want to leave this job and do something bigger? Something with impact?" He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" I smiled faintly. "You'll know when you're ready." Then I walked out, and the clock started ticking for Summit Air, for every executive hiding behind their glass walls, and for every person who thought someone like me didn't belong in first class. By the time I stepped out of the terminal and into the thick, humid air of DC, my phone was already buzzing non-stop. Group chats, news alerts, emails flagged with red exclamation points, the quiet chaos of corporate blood in the water. I slipped into a black car service my father had sent and sat in silence as the driver pulled into traffic. I stared out the window, watching planes glide over the Potomac, unaware that their parent company was about to start free-falling. The first headline hit before I crossed the 14th Street Bridge. Passenger removed from Summit Air Flight 481 claims racial profiling. Washington Journal, then another, this one louder. Video surfaces of black executive escorted off flight in handcuffs after seat dispute. Morning Chronicle, Jackson must have uploaded the footage. I tapped into my email. Dozens of unread messages. From legal, "We're drafting the statement. Waiting for your approval. From PR, we've intercepted press inquiries. Suggest silence until we control the framing. From Dad, don't answer any calls. Let the system eat itself for a few hours. I obeyed. Across social media, the story was erupting. The video showed everything. My calm voice, Karen's pointed tone, the captain's flat dismissal, the click of the cuffs. The image of me being escorted down the jet bridge had gone viral within the hour, paired with a now trending hashtag, #boarding-while-black. By midday, Summit Air's stock had dropped 12%. By end of day, it would fall further. At 3:14 p.m., CNBC ran a breaking banner. Clark Capital pulls $850 deal with Summit Air. That was the moment the world connected the dots. That the woman in the video wasn't just another black passenger being treated like a suspect. She was Madison Clark, and she was not alone. Messages poured in, many from strangers, more from those who knew exactly how I felt. I flew Summit last year. Got asked 3 times to show my ticket. Never happened to my white colleagues. I was bumped to coach for weight balancing. Only brown person in the cabin. My parents were told they couldn't sit together because first class wasn't assigned seating. It was a deluge. Then, the first former employee spoke out. A woman who had worked as a gate agent at LAX posted a thread detailing Summit's unspoken but clearly practiced policy. If they look out of place, double check, especially in first class. She'd quit 2 years ago. Her conscience couldn't bear it anymore. I didn't have to say a word. The story told itself. But behind the scenes, the wheels of damage control were spinning into overdrive. At Summit Air's headquarters in Chicago, CEO Thomas Baird was in a tailspin. According to internal memos leaked that same evening, he'd been aware of my identity from the beginning. Karen Whitmore had flagged me to him directly. The message, now viral, read, "Passenger Madison Clark, boarding flight 481. Daughter of Caleb Clark. Platinum profile but doesn't match behavior. Looks like another ego case. Want me to neutralize?" And Thomas's reply, "Do it discreetly. Clark family's overdue for a reminder they don't own every room they enter. It was meant to be an internal joke." A wink. It became his obituary. The leaked thread was posted by someone using the alias @FlightTruth. But people weren't stupid. Whistleblowers don't leak this kind of info unless the rot is deep and personal. The comment sections exploded. Neutralize? Are we talking about passengers or suspects? They knew who she was and still tried to humiliate her. They did this because they knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a power play. A spectacularly failed one. At 6:45 p.m., Summit's board held an emergency Zoom call. Investors were panicking. Their phones rang non-stop with media demands, client cancellations, boycott threats. By 7 o'clock p.m., 5 major corporate clients had paused their travel accounts with Summit. 2 government contracts had initiated internal reviews. Thomas Baird didn't issue a statement. He issued silence. That, too, was a mistake. Because by nightfall, the narrative was no longer about a single mistreatment. It was about intent, about institutional arrogance, and about the fantasy that power could be measured solely in gate access and uniform stripes. My family had made our fortune building leverage systems that outlived emotion. But this was personal. They had tried to remind us that we didn't own every room, so I would rebuild the room and take away their keys. In the dark comfort of my hotel suite, I sat back, phone still buzzing on the table, and let the chaos ripple. They wanted to teach the Clarks a lesson. Instead, they'd taught the world something else. That racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as soft as a smile and as sharp as a flight manifest. And when you try to quietly ruin a woman who built her empire on silence, you forget one thing. She knows how to fight back without raising her voice. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, Summit Air had hired Davidson Walsh, the most ruthless crisis management firm in North America. Their reputation wasn't for cleaning up messes. It was for burying them so deep, even God needed a subpoena to find the truth. The playbook was predictable. Shift the narrative, manufacture doubt, find a scapegoat, or better yet, frame the victim as the manipulator. Within 24 hours, news sites began running eerily similar stories. Clark capital leverage? Questions arise about timing of racial allegation. Summit Air passenger outrage sparks investor negotiation speculation. The whispers turned into headlines. The phrase that kept surfacing was weaponized identity. The implication? That I had staged the confrontation, or at least exaggerated it, to force leverage during ongoing acquisition talks. It was laughable on its face, except that some people were more willing to believe a woman of color had orchestrated a corporate ambush than that a corporation had mistreated a woman of color. That was the American algorithm. Davidson Walsh's fingerprints were all over the leaks. Strategically timed, anonymous sources began feeding sound bites to media outlets that had never cared about aviation news until now. One quote, allegedly from a Summit executive, read, "The Clark family is known for pulling strings behind closed doors. This looks more like a negotiation tactic than a civil rights issue." It was vague enough for plausible deniability, venomous enough to cause damage. Dad forwarded the article to me with a single line. "They've moved to phase 2. Hold position. We'll flank from inside." While the headline stirred doubt, something else was brewing behind closed doors. An internal Summit employee, anonymous but clearly high-ranking, had begun sending encrypted emails to several investigative journalists. One of them, a veteran at the Ledger, reached out to our team. The subject line, "You don't know the half of it." Inside were screenshots of internal Summit communications, including Slack messages and email threads showing top brass discussing my presence on the flight in real time, well before the incident occurred. One message from a senior VP read, "If we bend for every optics problem, we lose leverage. She needs to be handled like any other passenger." Another, "Let's not let this become another racial optics circus. Calm her down or remove her, quietly." The evidence was damning. Even more striking was who leaked it. The journalist refused to name the source, but one of the messages included a redacted signature. D. Chen. Danielle Chen, former director of internal compliance at Summit. I remembered her name because she had been quietly dismissed 2 years earlier, just weeks after recommending sweeping DEI reforms. I'd heard rumors she was blacklisted. No firm in the transportation sector would touch her after that. Until now. But the counterattack didn't stop there. 2 days after the footage of my removal went viral, a finance podcast released an explosive interview with Amir Khalid, CEO of a mid-size fintech startup in San Diego. The segment was titled, "The Other Side of Madison Clark." I listened with earbuds in, sitting by the window of my suite. "I pitched Madison Clark's firm 2 years ago," Amir said smoothly, "for Series B funding. We had the numbers, we had the traction, and she passed without even giving us a fair second meeting." The host pressed, "Are you saying she's unfair to minority founders?" "No," Amir replied. "I'm saying she's strategic, calculating. She only supports people who serve her long-term portfolio optics." My chest tightened, not from anger, but recognition, because I remembered Amir Khalid. He was the founder who had called one of my associates too aggressive after a negotiation call. The one who, in our follow-up, made a dismissive joke about hiring pretty analysts who can't read balance sheets. I hadn't rejected his company because of his race. I'd rejected it because it lacked ethics and integrity. But hearing his voice now, smoothed with manufactured credibility, was a gut punch. It sounded like betrayal. Until the second half of the interview dropped. The host came back a day later with a correction. Update. Amir Khalid admits a Summit PR team approached him for interview. Amir had reached out after the episode aired. He had a statement. Summit Air's communications team reached out to me asking if I had ever had negative dealings with Madison Clark. I was told my story could balance the narrative. I regret participating under that pretext. My experience, though real, was co-opted into a smear campaign. Boom. Twist revealed. What had initially felt like betrayal turned out to be exposure. The airline wasn't just managing perception, they were manufacturing it. That changed everything. Public backlash reignited. Civil rights leaders condemned the smear campaign. Multiple media outlets began retracting speculation pieces. And within Summit Air, the panic deepened. Because this wasn't just a social media scandal anymore. This was a pattern, with evidence, with voices, with receipts. Back in my suite, I pulled up the recording of Amir's walk back again and played it twice. Not because I needed the content, but because I needed the reminder that even when your own turn on you, sometimes it's just the next layer of truth unfolding. They'd tried to discredit me. Instead, they'd unmasked themselves. And the counterstrike? It had just backfired. The green room was cold, not temperature-wise, emotionally. Sterile lighting, gray leather chairs, a pot of untouched coffee on a table too sleek to feel human. I sat there in silence, wrapped in the soundproof calm of pre-broadcast tension. Outside, the network was buzzing. Tonight, I would go on the Claire Hastings Show, one of the most respected, no-nonsense current affairs programs in the country. Not sensationalist, not ratings-hungry, just truth and gravity. I wasn't here to perform. I was here to testify. "Ms. Clark?" A young producer poked her head in. "We're ready in 3. I stood, smoothed the front of my slate blue dress, and followed her to the stage. The set was minimalist. Clean lines, cool tones. A single chair across from Claire's, with nothing between us but silence and 8.3 million viewers. The cameras rolled. The intro music faded. And then Claire Hastings, silver-haired, steely-eyed, leaned in with the calm precision of a woman who'd been dissecting powerful people for decades.
Madison Clark, she began. Thank you for being here.
"Thank you for having me." "I want to start with what everyone saw," Claire said. "The footage, the cuffs, the walk off the plane. You were calm, controlled. But what were you feeling?" I took a breath, not to compose, but to anchor. "I was tired," I said. "Not from the flight, but from the pattern. From knowing exactly what was happening from the moment I was asked to show my boarding pass for the second time." Claire nodded.
Some are saying this was a misunderstanding, a procedural error. What do you say to that?
"I say patterns don't lie," I replied. "A misunderstanding doesn't happen 4 times in one flight. It doesn't end with handcuffs. It doesn't magically target people who all look like me." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Summit Air has implied you're using your identity as leverage." "I'm using data," I said simply. "And truth. Identity is just the lens that makes the cracks in the system visible." Claire paused for a beat. "Let's talk about the footage. We've all seen what the passengers recorded. But tonight, we've obtained new video, courtesy of an anonymous Summit employee." I blinked. I hadn't been told this part. Claire looked at the monitor off stage. The screen behind us lit up. Grainy at first, then sharp. It was a cockpit feed, angled diagonally down the aisle. Not the typical cabin cam. This was internal, restricted, unavailable to the public. It showed Karen Whitmore leaning toward Captain Hayes before departure, whispering, pointing toward my seat. The camera had no audio, but the gestures were unmistakable. Finger, nod, smirk. Then Karen mimed a hand signal, flicking her wrist like tightening cuffs. The captain didn't react with concern. He laughed, clearly, visibly, and nodded. The footage played on. The moment I was approached, the way I stayed still, the way the captain stormed out of the cockpit without ever checking anything. No manifest, no system, just decision. The audience in the studio had gone dead quiet. Claire turned back to me.
"Ms. Clark," she said softly, "did you know this existed?"
"No," I said. And for the first time, I let the edge crack through my voice. But I'm not surprised. Why not? Because power rarely needs proof when it acts, but it always leaves fingerprints. The camera zoomed slightly closer. I looked straight into the lens. I'm not here to punish a flight crew, I said. I'm here to highlight a system that allows this behavior, encourages it, and then protects it behind closed doors. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm demanding evolution. Claire let the words hang in the air before nodding. Final question, she said. If Summit's CEO is watching this right now, what would you say? I turned fully toward the camera, my voice steady. You tried to embarrass me to send a message, but you failed to understand who you were dealing with. I am not a leverage tactic. I am not a PR problem. I am a reflection of the truth you've ignored. And now, the world sees it too. The screen faded to black. The show cut to commercial, but the damage was done. The clip of the cockpit footage hit social media within minutes. It spread like wildfire. They planned it. They joked about it. She stayed silent, but they got loud in secret. The video had 3 million views in under an hour. By morning, 20 million. That night, I received a message. Unsigned, but familiar. Thank you for not yelling. It's what made the world listen. I didn't reply, because I wasn't done speaking. The morning after the Claire Hastings show aired, I woke up to a different kind of silence. Not the hollow silence of humiliation, not the strategic silence of waiting, but the silence that follows collapse. When systems start cracking from their foundations and those inside are too stunned to scream. My phone lit up before my eyes even adjusted to the light. Breaking. Summit Air CEO Thomas Baird terminated amid discrimination scandal. Wall Street View underneath was a press release from Summit's board, blandly worded but unmistakable in its implications. In light of recent developments and in pursuit of rebuilding public trust, the board of Summit Air has accepted the resignation of Mr. Thomas Baird, effective immediately. Resignation, a polite fiction. Baird had been removed like a defective part from a jet engine, fast, quiet, and with minimal debris. By 9:00 a.m., the market responded. Summit stock dipped another 8%. By noon, 3 of its largest institutional investors announced suspension of all future investment pending a comprehensive internal review of corporate ethics and equity policy. By 2:00 p.m., 2 of Summit's international airline partners began exploring alternative joint ventures. It was beautiful in its brutality, an implosion executed not with explosives, but with exposure. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, what I felt was colder, more surgical. The kind of clarity that came when you realized the fight was never about you personally, it was about what you represented. At 4:12 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number. Normally, I don't answer those, but something in me knew. "Miss Clark," came a woman's voice, calm, professional, and oddly unguarded. "My name is Vanessa Rivera, interim CEO of Summit Air." I didn't respond immediately. She continued, "I won't waste your time. The board has empowered me to rebuild trust, not with a press tour, with real reform, starting with leadership." I waited. "I'd like to offer you a position," she said. "Newly created, Chief Ethics and Equity Officer, reporting directly to me and to the board. Full autonomy, full access." I let the silence sit long enough to be uncomfortable. "And what makes you think I'd take it?" "Because you've said from the start this isn't about revenge," she replied. "And because no one is better positioned to ensure this never happens again." I gave her one thing. She didn't grovel. She was firm, strategic, like me. I told her I'd think about it. Then I called my father. He picked up before the first ring. "You heard," I said. "I did." "She offered me a seat at the table," I said. "Real power, oversight, direct line to the board." His pause was longer than I expected. "I know that tone," he said finally. "What tone?" "The one you used when you decided to do that internship at the UN instead of joining the firm straight out of Yale. When you wanted to prove something. This isn't about proving anything. No, he asked. Because it sounds a lot like someone about to walk into a burning building just to say she tried to change it from the inside.
They're giving me real tools, Dad, not a symbolic role. I could build structure, process, make it mean something.
You could also build your own house instead of fixing someone else's. That hit deeper than I wanted to admit. You taught me that leadership isn't about ego. I did, he agreed. But I also taught you to know the difference between being handed a sword and being handed a target. I didn't answer. He exhaled. You're free to choose, he said. But remember, when they invite you to the table, ask who set the menu and why you weren't cooking to begin with. He hung up without goodbye. That was his way. Direct, final. I sat with his words for the rest of the night. He wanted me to build something new. A Madison-led initiative. A think tank. A coalition. A fund. Anything but going to work for the very machine that tried to break me. But maybe the real power wasn't just outside the system. Maybe it was in taking control of its gears. By midnight, I sent my reply to Vanessa Rivera. I didn't accept. Not yet. I sent her a counteroffer, a full proposal. If I were to take the position, I wanted total authority over DEI policy, budgetary independence, a permanent advisory council made up of passengers who had experienced discrimination, transparent reporting pipelines, whistleblower protection, no NDAs on complaints, and most importantly, the right to terminate any employee, no matter rank, who violated the new ethics charter. If she agreed, then we'd talk. Because this wasn't about joining them. It was about making sure no one like me ever had to knock on their door again. It began in a quiet conference room on the 40th floor of an office tower in Midtown Manhattan. No cameras, no microphones, no press. Just a long oak table, 12 name placards, and a pot of black coffee that nobody touched for the first 20 minutes. I stood at the head of the table and looked out at the people gathered, 12 individuals, each with a story etched behind their eyes. They weren't celebrities. They weren't politicians. They were the overlooked, the passed over, the ones who'd sat quietly in seat 22B and swallowed their humiliation with complimentary peanuts. This was our first convening of the Passenger Equity Advisory Council, the first of its kind in aviation history. A council made not of executives or analysts, but of real people who had experienced discrimination firsthand and survived it with their dignity intact. Each person had been carefully selected, not just because of what had been done to them, but because of what they did after. They didn't scream into the void. They organized, documented, endured. Quiet resistance made visible. I opened the session without a speech, just a sentence. You weren't crazy, and you weren't alone. The silence that followed cracked like thunder. A middle-aged black man from Atlanta, David, nodded slowly. When they told me to move to the back, they said it was a weight distribution issue. I was the only one moved. A hijabi woman named Samira shared how she'd been detained on a layover because her last name matched a list, though no one could show her which one. An elderly Korean-American couple spoke softly through their granddaughter about being ignored when they tried to report that their business-class seats had been reassigned to white passengers who boarded after them. Each voice added a weight to the room, not just sorrow, but legitimacy. Proof that the system wasn't broken by accident. It was functioning exactly as it was allowed to. And then came the twist. A quiet woman named Evelyn had barely spoken. Late 30s, brown hair tied back, dressed plainly in slacks and a navy blazer. She had submitted her story anonymously during the selection process. Now she cleared her throat and said softly, "I used to work for Summit." The room paused. I was a gate agent at LAX for 5 years. All eyes turned toward her. "I watched it happen over and over," she continued. "If a passenger didn't look the part, we were trained to double confirm. It wasn't written down, but it was reinforced every day." She looked down at her hands. "I filed a complaint after seeing a teenage boy with Down syndrome pulled aside and denied boarding because the crew wasn't comfortable. I filed internally, then followed up.
A week later, I was written up for insubordination. 2 weeks after that, I was let go for attendance violations. A silence settled. Different this time. Respectful. Heavy. "Why did you apply to be here?" I asked gently. She looked up. "Because you made it impossible for them to bury what they've been doing. And because I've waited 5 years to tell someone who would actually listen." I nodded once. "We're listening now." Around the table, something shifted. Shoulders relaxed, jaws unclenched. People leaned forward, not back. I laid out the charter of the council next. Quarterly reports to the board, full access to customer complaint data, influence over training programs and policy revisions, voting power on employee reinstatement after misconduct. This wasn't performative inclusion. This was systemic restructuring, with victims turned architects. "We won't just give feedback," I said. "We'll write the standard." The rest of the session flowed like a current finally unblocked. They debated policies, suggested accountability mechanisms, argued over definitions of escalation protocols. It was rigorous, passionate, focused. Exactly what I hoped it would be. After the session ended, most lingered. David stood by the window, watching the city lights come on. Samira called her mother in Arabic, her voice bright with something like pride. Evelyn sat alone, looking down at her notebook, filled with scribbled notes in black ink, her fingers tapping anxiously at the edge. I approached her quietly. "You did more than survive, Evelyn," I said. "You became the kind of witness the system fears." She looked up. "I'm not a lawyer or an activist." "You don't have to be," I replied. "You're something rarer, someone who saw the machine from the inside and still chose to speak." She smiled, small but real. Later that night, I stood alone in my office, looking at the names on the council list. Each name a scar, each voice a record. We'd gathered, and when people gather, when they're heard, systems tremble. This wasn't charity, this was redesign. The only question now was how far we were willing to take it, and I already knew my answer, all the way. The first thing I changed was the locks, not the literal ones, but the locks on information. Access, oversight, accountability. When the board officially confirmed my role as Chief Ethics and Equity Officer, I was granted a key card that opened more than just doors. It opened entire systems, training protocols, hiring pipelines, complaint archives, and digital black boxes full of quietly dismissed reports. Summit Air had always boasted a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination. What I found beneath that glossy veneer was closer to zero responsibility. In the first 2 weeks, I reviewed over 400 internal reports labeled "resolved." Nearly half had been closed without action. Many of the victims never even received follow-up calls. The rot wasn't just in behavior, it was in bureaucracy. So I got to work. I rewrote the incident response protocols, changed escalation structures, installed an external review board for every discrimination complaint. We updated training, rewrote scripts, ran simulations with actors, everything from gate to landing. Real passengers, real scenarios. The board signed off, the public applauded. But inside the company, not everyone was clapping. Resistance came quietly. Emails with delayed responses, calendar invites that mysteriously vanished, meeting rooms that were accidentally double-booked. At first it was petty, then it turned darker. An anonymous email leaked to the press accused me of lowering operational morale and undermining chain of command. It didn't stick, but it signaled something deeper. Sabotage wasn't going to come through the front door, so I built a mirror. I commissioned an internal audit, not run by HR, but by an outside consultancy with zero ties to the airline. They spent 3 weeks crawling through 6 years of data, and what they found cracked the floor beneath my feet. 17 separate instances where policies had been quietly bypassed. Passenger complaints redirected without escalation. Whistleblower statements buried under performance concerns.
Internal training modules marked complete without being run. The worst part? These weren't mistakes. They were coordinated efforts. Team leads working together to check boxes while avoiding accountability. It wasn't just one bad actor, it was culture. And culture is the hardest thing to rebuild. Vanessa Rivera, now officially installed as CEO, met with me in her corner office. "We can suspend them all," she said. "Make an example. Clean sweep." I shook my head. Suspension won't change behavior. Fear isn't reform. "So, what do you suggest?" "Exposure," I said, "and education." I created a controlled accountability program. The 17 employees weren't fired. They were publicly reassigned to work under the supervision of the advisory council, not as leaders, as learners. They'd attend weekly restorative sessions with passengers, sit in real-time feedback panels, and shadow frontline roles: gate agents, flight attendants, customer support lines. They'd see the impact of their indifference, frame by frame. The unions pushed back. The legal team warned me, but I didn't budge. "Transparency isn't punishment," I told them. "It's prevention." Slowly, something shifted. Some of the 17 began speaking in sessions, acknowledging not just what they'd done, but what they'd failed to see. One man, Jason, a senior crew coordinator, stood up during a council session and said, "I used to think the system worked fine, but the system only looked fine because it was designed for people like me." That sentence traveled like gospel through the company. Not everyone transformed. Some transferred. A few resigned. But for the ones who stayed, the ice started to crack. And beneath it, I saw something I hadn't expected to find so soon. Trust. Not perfect, not permanent, but real. One afternoon, I found myself alone in the training simulation hangar. A new module had been added, First-Class Escalation Response. It was based on me. I watched from behind the glass as an actor playing a black woman was asked for ID by an actor crew member. The real trainee paused. Instead of repeating the verify and remove steps, she asked calmly, "Have we applied this process to every passenger today?" I smiled. Progress, not in policies, but in instinct. Later that day, I walked past the executive wing and noticed something odd. Evelyn, the former gate agent who'd become our most active council member, was sitting with 2 employees from marketing. She was explaining complaint resolution in front of a whiteboard. One of them raised a hand, asked about tone escalation. Evelyn answered like she'd been doing it for years. And just like that, another lock opened. I stepped away quietly. We were building something now. Not just a compliance system, but an ethic. Something that could outlive me or outlast another scandal. That night in my apartment, I lit a single candle for the past, for the 17 who stayed, for the voices that had once been dismissed, and for the truth that refused to stay quiet. Progress, I'd learned, never moves in a straight line. It loops, doubles back, gets ambushed. And just when you think the system has begun to bend, someone steps in to snap it back. That someone came in the form of a lawsuit, filed in federal court by Captain Roger Hayes, the same man who had once walked down the aisle of Flight 481 and without question or hesitation had me removed from the plane. The charge? Hostile workplace environment and reverse discrimination under the direction of Chief Ethics Officer Madison Clark. I read the filing twice, then a third time. It wasn't just Hayes. He was joined by 6 current and former Summit employees, all white, all men, all with long-tenured positions in flight operations and management. They called themselves the Civic Integrity Coalition, a name that sounded more like a political action group than an employee bloc. Their claim was bold, that Summit's new ethical policies undermined traditional hierarchies, shamed veteran staff, and prioritized performative progress over operational stability. Translation: we liked it better when we were in charge and no one questioned why. Their legal representation came from a firm known for defending companies against union regulations and pushing conservative civil liberties cases. This wasn't just a counterpunch. It was a statement. The press latched onto it immediately. Pilot sues over anti-bias reforms. Is Summit's diversity push unfair? Whistleblowers or backlash? My inbox exploded. News requests, internal concerns, legal team briefings. Board members divided, some calling for calm, others ready to go on the offensive. Vanessa Rivera called me at midnight. "Do we respond?" she asked. "No," I said. "We defend. Quietly. Let the courtroom be the arena." Still, it shook us. Not because their claims had merit, but because the media, hungry for balance, treated the lawsuit as equal weight to the suffering we'd uncovered. I knew this pattern. When power feels threatened, it doesn't just push back, it plays victim. Hayes gave interviews, clean suit, calm tone, sound bites rehearsed. I spent my life flying planes safely, following rules. Now I'm being painted as a villain because I asked a question. He never mentioned the footage, never addressed the smirk, the hand signal. He didn't have to. His job wasn't to prove innocence, just to cast doubt. The case dragged on for months. Then the first twist hit. During pre-trial discovery, our legal team uncovered internal messages between Hayes and the other plaintiffs, dating back to 2 weeks before Flight 481. They weren't just angry about the reforms. They'd planned to resist them. One email, dated 3 days before my removal, read, "If corporate wants to play identity politics, let's see how they like a personnel shakeup. We'll create our own paper trail." Another from a flight coordinator. "Clark's being groomed as the next face of Summit. We either re-establish the chain of command or we walk and take media with us." The most damning message? From Hayes himself, time-stamped hours before I boarded Flight 481. "She'll be on 481. Let's remind them what command looks like." That one made me sit still for a long time, because in that moment, every question I'd asked myself, was this personal? Was this systemic? Was it about race or power or both? Collapsed into clarity. It wasn't imagined. It was orchestrated. We submitted the messages as evidence. The case crumbled almost immediately. The judge, a former federal civil rights attorney, dismissed the claims with a scathing ruling. There is no legal basis to argue that equity efforts, when backed by evidence and due process, create a hostile work environment for those who benefited from prior imbalance. Hayes and his coalition were not just denied, they were exposed. And with that ruling, something shifted inside Summit again. Employees who had been hesitant, quietly skeptical, began stepping up. A middle manager in IT came forward to report her supervisor for years of exclusionary behavior. A flight attendant submitted a complaint against a lead trainer who had been editing DEI modules before sharing them with staff. The final resistance had triggered a new wave of resolve. The fear of backlash had been replaced by the power of precedent. I didn't gloat. Not publicly, not even in private. Because this wasn't a win against men like Hayes. It was a win against the culture that told people like him that equality was an attack. Still, I allowed myself one small moment. I printed his final message, the one about reminding me what command looks like, and folded it neatly. Then I slid it into the back of my journal. A reminder of my own. That leadership is not about reminding people of your authority. It's about proving that systems can change, and must, if dignity is ever to become policy, not privilege. The ballroom of the Global Aviation Equity Summit glowed in gold and white, sleek, sterile, ceremonial. Industry leaders, regulators, union reps, human rights observers, and airline CEOs sat in rows of dark suits and polished shoes, whispering over programs and checking watches. This was the event they hadn't dared imagine 5 years ago, and I was the keynote. When I stepped onto the stage, I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. Behind me, the screen displayed the title of my presentation, Flight Path, the first annual Equity Accountability Report in Commercial Aviation. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic, but it was historic. I scanned the audience, Some leaned forward with anticipation. Others sat back with arms crossed, calculating. I spoke slowly, deliberately. For decades, flying was marketed as freedom. Open skies, global connection, every seat the same in the air. But we know the truth. The experience of flying is not just about altitude. It's about access. It's about respect. It's about who's treated as a passenger and who's treated as a problem. A few heads nodded. A few phones discreetly recorded. In the past 12 months, Summit Air has not only rebuilt its ethics infrastructure, we've opened it. We've made every complaint traceable, every outcome reviewable, every reform measurable. I gestured to the data behind me. Discrimination-related complaints down 72%. First-class boardings by people of color up 41%. Employee turnover and compliance-related roles down 60%. Customer trust index highest since 2009. And more importantly, I added, for the first time, we've made sure the passenger voice doesn't end at the boarding gate. The slide changed. 12 faces appeared. The members of our Passenger Equity Advisory Council. A ripple of applause swept the room. But I wasn't finished. Changing a company isn't enough. We need to change the culture of flying itself. Not just policies, but expectations. I paused, then let the final line land. The sky belongs to all of us, and so should dignity. The audience rose, a standing ovation. Not performative, not delayed, immediate and electric. I nodded once, stepped off stage, and didn't stop walking until I reached the side corridor backstage. There, I pulled out my phone and typed a message. This time, I changed the system, not the deal. I hit send to Caleb Clark. No reply, not yet, but I knew he read it, always did. Back at the hotel that night, I watched from the window as planes glided in and out of LaGuardia, their lights blinking like soft Morse code against the black. A gentle knock came at the door. It was Vanessa Rivera, holding a folder and wearing that same unreadable half-smile. "You were brilliant," she said, handing me the folder. Inside, next year's ethics forecast, new partner requests, and a private letter from the Secretary of Transportation requesting my participation in a federal review. "Looks like you're the model now," she said. "How does it feel?" "Unreal," I admitted. "But necessary." She hesitated. "There's one more thing," she added. I raised an eyebrow. She sat. "I've heard whispers," she said. "Not bad ones, just curious ones." I waited. "You've been taking meetings, quiet ones, with engineers, former execs, venture partners, pilots." She wasn't wrong. "And the rumor is," she continued, "you're building something." I didn't answer. She smiled. "I won't stop you," she said. "Hell, I'll probably invest in it, but I want to hear it from you." So I told her about the sketches, about the name, about the idea that wouldn't let me sleep. A new kind of airline. No classes, no coded seating language, no loyalty tiers built on privilege instead of purpose. Just one standard of service for everyone. Crew trained in de-escalation, not enforcement. Boarding by birth date, not business status. And a name that meant exactly what it sounded like. Equal Air. She let the words hang, then said, "Madison, you know they'll fight you for this." I'm counting on it. Weeks later, the first press leak appeared. Just a whisper on a tech blog. Is Madison Clark starting her own airline? No logo, no statement, no denial. Just a headline and a ripple. I didn't rush to confirm it. Not yet. Because I'd learned something critical over the past year. Real change doesn't need permission. It needs vision. And just enough turbulence to reach cruising altitude. So I stood by the window of Equal Air's small temporary office overlooking the East River, watching another plane rise into the evening sky. One day soon, the sky would hold a new name, and with it, a new promise. Not just that you could fly, but that you'd matter while doing it, because this time, the sky truly would belong to all of us.